and we're going to start. If I can. Oh yeah. Okay, so that didn't work. Here we go. So welcome everyone as you're coming in. I'm just gonna ask you to mute yourselves. Which is great. Fantastic. I'm sure we'll have many more people joining us in the next several minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and start though. So welcome to All Souls Unitarian Universalist Church. This is our digital service for Sunday, February 27th, 2022. I'm Kirsten Levitt, and I'm delighted to be one of your worship hosts this morning. I want to thank Rob Peck for being my ally and co-leader in today's service. Rob, it's a joy to have you here this morning and to have worked with you on this service.
Right back at you.
We have the joy of coming together today, and we want to make sure that everyone feels welcome here. So please turn on your cameras. I'm going to stop the share and welcome or greet those who are with us this morning. You can also send little chats to them. You can wave, but it's great to see you all here. It's great. Awesome. Thank you so much. If this is your first visit here and you would like us to contact you, I'd love for you to drop your contact information in the chat. So we'll send you our weekly service information and monthly newsletter. And we're grateful to have each and every one of you here with us online today. If you're joining us via YouTube, you can send your information to admin@ugreenfield.org. Let me say that again, admin@ugreenfield.org. I would like to know, does anybody have any announcements before we start? So are there any community announcements for us to share? If you have an announcement, unmute yourself and go ahead.
Hey, Rob, are you going to tell us about next Sunday?
Yes,
Okay, I turned do not disturb on.
So next Sunday is a musician and a poet and just an all-out fine human being named Harold Payne. I first met Harold at the Positive Music Conference, and he just has a bright light and a big heart, and I loved the way he combines a message with a great song. Harold lives all the way out on the West Coast, but through the miracle of Zoom, he graciously agreed to get up super early for him and deliver both the music and the message for next Sunday's program. It's got a very simple title, Love Wins.
Awesome. Thank you. Are there any other announcements? Okay, hearing none. I direct you to your screen before we have our next little bit. I want you to look at these two quotes They set the stage for today's service. Anti-racism, active verb. Listen, learn, amplify, donate, rally, vote, and repeat. It is a privilege to educate yourself about racism instead of experiencing it. Ahmed Ali. And now I invite everyone to breathe. Breathe deeply. Come into the room. Be present. Be focused. Be at peace. In the words of the Reverend Kathleen McTeague, we've come together this morning to remind one another to rest for a moment on the forming edge of our lives, to resist the headlong tumble into the next moment until we claim for ourselves awareness and gratitude, taking the time to look into one another's faces and see communion. This house of laughter and silence, memory and hope, is hallowed by our presence together. Here's this morning's prelude.
You booked a sunny Verbo ski chalet with endless views of snow-covered peaks. But the thing they'll remember.
I don't know why it's giving me ads. So thank you all for joining us. That was our prelude.
I have a question. Was Mary a whore?
I'm sorry, if you can't, this is a church service, and if you can't do the right thing here, then we'll be deleting you.
I think you need to shut up, you stupid cunt.
Oh, boy.
Kick him out.
I've done that.
I did.
Thank you.
We kicked out two. I kicked out two, at least. So that's one of the things that happens when you open this dialogue, and we're just going to try to hold as much sacred space as possible. And so I give this over to Rob to do the chalice lighting. Rob, you're muted.
How about now? Is that better?
There you go.
While the Black Eyed Peas video has some hard images, it also speaks some deep truths. And I think that, being on the side of love is a lot of what our church covenant, a lot of what all of our work together today is about. Our chalice lighting is actually an adaptation from one of my favorite childhood songs from Sylvester Stewart, better known as Sly and the Family Stone. 'Tis the sun that loves you round when the system tries to bring you down. Stars always come out to shine at night, but you don't need darkness to do what you think is right. Everybody is a star. I can feel it when you shine on me.
Thank you so much. And now, let's read our congregational covenant together. In this house, we covenant with one another to create a community
On a foundation of love.
to work together to promote equity, justice, and peace,
Accepting responsibility for our individual acts.
to stand on the
And on the side of love,
embracing
embracing the liberation of oppressed minorities,
and working
to end discrimination and unjust privilege.
to communicate
Communicate with kindness and support,
and to
and to
serve
serve with compassion and commitment.
to listen
Listen respectfully,
Sorry, guys. All right.
Our diversity as a
Source of our collective strength to learn and grow together, generously sharing our time, talents, and treasures, to celebrate the joys of discovery from the wonder of youth to the wisdom of age, to openly share our laughter and our tears, showing reverence for the divine in all that is.
And now I'm going to stop the share so Rob can read his reading to you.
I'll be right there, I hope. I got to find some way that I can minimize this screen. Okay, I think I figured it out. All right. So, focusing on white privilege can get under your skin, perhaps especially if it's a white skin, but in a good way. The words are so poignant and the concepts are so powerful in the books that we've been reading, they've kept me up reading them past midnight. One morning, they woke me up with a poem. It was really more like a 3-page polemic. I knew that'd be too long to share aloud, so I revised it and pared it down to just 2.5 pages. Talk about being a ruthless self-editor. I hope it'll tie some threads together, not so much in a bow, as in a knotty question that takes this shape. Enlightenment, all the blues that's fit to print. I'm going to preface it with a one-line quote from Dr. Cornel West. Never forget that justice is what love looks like in public. Okay, no more prologue. Here it goes. Enlightenment, all the blues that's fit to print. What if there was something black, as universally revered as freshly fallen snow, draped over green boughs, pure and bright, black and brown kids laughing with ease, sliding silently into soft piles of delight, sleigh bells ring, carolers sing, merry melodies wafting on the winter breeze. But raven flakes don't fall from the sky like black velvet. And from the day they're born till the night they die, these young girls and boys grow up being looked down on. Innocence interrupt us in a Caucasian-controlled, not-so-little black lie. A winter white land where nobody's dreaming of a bright black Christmas, and trees glistening in anything but pure white is for many a pure nightmare. What's in a color? Why is it okay to say people of color, but not colored people? We don't need to go to the South Pole, the North Pole, or the Gallup Pole to see there's no such thing as colorblind when it comes to race. America is unevenly divided, a binary democracy. US and them, black and white, red or blue, wrong versus right, shades of gray only happen in R-rated movies. Back in the day, August 1963, MLK blew them away, gave those who tried to cash a bad check the 5th degree, called out the bondage of racism from the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, that venerable monument to freedom, forever situated in the shadow of the White House. Martin preached how ebony bodies don't do well in a binary world, a fiery speech that to this day is quoted by rappers and sages. The good Dr. King knew that to discriminate was bad medicine, a drug that would relegate BIPOC dreams back to the dark ages. Black and brown girls defamed, discriminated, and castigated, chalk it up to ghetto culture and dark forces. Black and brown boys shamed, violated, and castrated, leave it to the old boy network of shady deals and dark money. Fear rises as an inky shadow of gloom descends. Can sworn enemies ever see each other as friends. It's tough to see the light when you're in the dark. Hard to feel smart when the cops come to your place, and to survive you gotta decide to play dumb. While they tie your wrists to your side, force you to lie face down, while the members of another all-white jury can't tell you apart. What's the bad word? Black sheep, black moon, black day. Black male, blackballed, blacklisted, blackout. In a binary world, ain't nothing politically correct about being dark. Except dark horse victory is tall, dark, and handsome, dark humor, and 70% dark chocolate. Undernourished and underrepresented and under attack. Second-class citizenship isn't fake news, it's a painful fact. A lingering disgrace that can't be denied. Our nation's manifest hypocrisy. Don't bring up race, because America's got a fit to be tied, sad history. Undermining its noble constitution with an ignoble Bill of Rights. A document the stealthy dog whistlers were sure was waterproof, fireproof, and foolproof. In their arrogance, they failed to read the fine blues fit to print by Ruby Dee and Langston Hughes. In their intolerance, they forgot that slurs and dogma were no match for spirit and karma. And in their ignorance, they never saw that the stain of racism leaves the dark mark of he who can't be named. Bottom line, it's high time, America, to put your house in order. And if we're to help our nation with this urgent home repair, integration and reparations are the two top jobs, and neither can get done with a cover-up and a quick fix. Pulling our country together means mixing candor and courage into moral mortar. If you're ready to roll up your sleeve and aren't deceived by easy money and false promises, congratulations, you're eligible, and you can start today. Note, rebuilding America is an equal opportunity endeavor. Privileged zealots, powerful lobbyists, patriotic apologists, uptight far-right house cleaners, and Senate whitewashers need not apply. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. So this is the time in our service where we ask for your pledges, your gifts that help support All Souls Church and its many missions. You can send your pledge to P.O. Box 542, Greenfield, Mass. 01302, or do a pledge online through PayPal at treasurer@uu.org. And now, a video from Gil Scott Heron. Sorry.
My lifetime, I've been in town. Was no freedom or the future around. I've been in places where you could not eat or take a drink of water wherever you please. And now that I meet you in the middle of a mountain well, keep on out from within. And all I can think of are the chapters and scenes of all of the places we've been. I'm not such an old man, so don't get me wrong. I'm the latest survivor of constantly strong. I've been in Mississippi, turns out the same days of plenty and nights with nothing to do. But I'm not too happy about the middle of the mountain, so soon I'll be climbing again. All I can think of are chapters and seasons, all of the places we've been. Raised up in a small town in the country down south, so I've been close enough to know what the passion's about. Placed on this mountain with a rare chance to see dreams once envisioned by folks much braver than me. And since their lives got me to the middle of a mountain, well, I can't stop and give up on them. Their lights that shine on and inspire me to climb on from all of the places we've been. From all of the places we've been. All of the places we've been, a lot of places, yeah, from all of the places we've been down, been down, been down a lot of roads and places. All
Powerful. Privilege is invisible to those who are born with it. That's a quote from Layla Saad. And if you had asked me a year ago if I knew who this person was or what my journey would be, I would have told you no to both of those. Let me tell you a little story about me. I was born and raised in New York City. I had bohemian, liberal parents. Everybody and anybody was in my house. It didn't matter what your color was, what your sexuality was, even what your political leanings were. It didn't matter what religion you were. What mattered was you were a human being. And thus began my acceptance of all people and all types, and also my indoctrination to colorblindness. As a young lady, I never dated white men. I lived in a neighborhood that was predominantly Latino, Dominican, Puerto Rican, Cuban. And it had been an immigrant community. Previous to that, it was Jewish and Polish and German. And I had people in my life that just accepted me for who I was. And I accepted them. And when I went to middle school at 135th Street in Harlem, I was the only white girl in the school. And you know what got me able to walk through the door every single day? White privilege. But I didn't know that. I was absolutely clueless to that. I was raised by these liberal people who were colorblind. And the first year I went to school in Harlem, I had the privilege of watching Roots as it unfolded for the entire nation, except that when I went to school the next day, I had Black children following me through the halls saying things that were in the TV show, like Toby be goodness, nigger for massa. Remember, I was the only white girl in the school. I was attacked. My belongings were destroyed. My mother didn't care. I still went back to school. I'll fast forward for you. I had relationships, and I had a relationship with someone who was Puerto Rican. He just passed away this year. And out of that relationship, I birthed a biracial child. I'll fast forward again for you. I then left New York, went to Cleveland, lived a couple of different lives there, went to school and became a school teacher. And then I moved to Massachusetts and started working in Springfield, where the Office of Civil Rights had told everyone that the school system was racist, institutionalized racism was existent in the school systems, which was 100% true, and that children of color were being inordinately labeled with learning disabilities, and that there was a major problem, and that teachers needed to be taught how to look at students and their needs rather than just their color and the stereotypes associated with them. And I became a trainer. And I went through all kinds of anti-racism training. And this was me 25 years ago, reading Unpacking Your White Backpack, Unpacking Your Backpack of White Privilege. I'm not a racist. Are you kidding me? You cannot possibly tell me I'm a racist. I have a biracial child. I married a man who was nearly Black. He was Latin. I had a biracial child with a Latin man. I have Black friends. I do not believe in racist practices. You cannot tell me I'm a racist. You can't do that. It took them weeks and weeks and weeks. And I finally one day I broke down and I said, okay, whatever you say, I'm a racist. Whatever you say. Will this make it easier for you to work with me? If I admit to you that I'm a racist, even though in my heart of hearts, I don't believe so, I have to tell you that 25 years ago, they were trying to make me understand something that was not explained well. I am a racist, and so are all of you. Let me say that again. I am a racist, and so are all of you. You cannot not see color. You cannot not have swum in the sea of white culture supremacy that this nation is built upon without being a racist. And that's what the Black Eyed Peas were saying in this morning's prelude. One of the strongest lines for me in that song was, if you never speak truth, then you never know how love sounds. So let me go back to my journey, and I'm going to go back and share my screen again. Go back again, Kirsten. Sorry, guys. Privilege is invisible to those who are born with it. If you have white skin or you're white passing, you are born with a level of privilege in this country and maybe even in the world, unfortunately, that gives you privilege, all kinds of privilege. But how it gives you privilege is a way that only each of us can understand by doing the work of looking into ourselves. So as I started with, a year ago, I would not tell you that I was here today like this. I bought Me and White Supremacy last January. I had a long conversation with my board president, Whitney, and we were talking about the Stone Soup Café, and we were talking about its walk and its talk around being welcoming and inclusive of all. And she said, you need to do this. You need to read this book, Me and White Supremacy. And I said, okay. And I bought it. And it sat there. And then I had a conversation with another member of my staff. And I said, you know, I have this book. And she's like, I want to read it with you. And I said, okay. And then we found an accountability book group, and we started Me and White Supremacy. Me and White Supremacy is a daily reading and journaling book. And I've now read it and journaled 3 times through in the last year, and I'm not through. Each time I've done this, I have learned more about myself. I'm going to give you a little understanding of what's in this book and how you might be unpacking your own life. And it might not be this book that you use, but this is the book I use that helps me speak truth and spread love. Is anybody here really uncomfortable with confrontation? I know I can be really uncomfortable with confrontation. That could be your white fragility showing up. It could be your perfectionism and needing to be right showing up. We have white privilege because of the color of our skin. We're fragile because everything around us is centered on whiteness, whiteness being normal. We practice white silence. We don't necessarily speak up when all we see around us in media and literature and is white promotion of whiteness and the American way and the living dream. It's all more white supremacy. Maybe perhaps you've decided you like to participate in Cinco de Mayo. If you're not Mexican and you're not from Puebla, you have no right. It's called cultural appropriation. Perhaps you have participated in racial stereotyping, putting people of one race all together as one kind of thing. And usually white people are right. I have a phrase for that. You're white, so you're right. It's wrong. These are all things that we dig into in this book, in the study of this book. White saviorism. I have a friend who's a Black woman who was asked to speak on a legislative panel because of the color of her skin, not because of what she could bring to the discussion about health. That's tokenism. Showing up and saying, I'm there for you, and then not really showing up, that's optical allyship. These are all things that the book explores, and I've dug into 3 times, and it would take me 3 hours to tell you about it. And I have maybe 2 more minutes. This book changed how I look at things. This is the one I'm fighting with right now. My desire to be seen as good can actually prevent me from doing good, because if I don't see myself as part of a problem, the problem, I can't be part of the solution. Listen, my friends, a lot of you are great, amazing human beings, and I love you deeply. And a lot of you are good white people. Don't be good white people. be people who are challenging yourselves to learn about the ways in which you have swallowed the ocean of white supremacist culture that you swim in and start spitting it out. I leave you with this question for you to mull over for a moment. Because learning and reflection lead to self-discovery. In what ways have you believed that you are exceptional, exempt, one of the good ones, or above the conditioning of white supremacy? Remember, those of us born into privilege can't see it. It's our privilege to learn about how to undo this privilege so that everyone has it. Each and every one of us wants to be a wonderful person. I leave you with this thought. Create the change in the world that you create the change the world needs by creating change within yourself. Today's a little different. We have 2 homilies, so I'm going to give you a little music to kind of process what I've just said. I've shared my truth, and there's more to share, but not today. Oh, great. An ad. Sorry, guys.
Sometimes I'm right, and I can be wrong. My own beliefs are in my song. Butcher, the baker, the drummer, and makes no difference what you found in.
No sound. Kirsten, the sound cut out.
There's a suggestion to hit the share audio button.
Shine, shine.
Okay.
You know, hold on one second. How can I?
I'm muted too. I'm talking to you and I'm muted. I'm so sorry, guys.
That's okay. I'm just trying to find my notes, but I think once you quit sharing your screen, I can find them.
Well, I'm sorry. All right. I'll stop the share, but you had a quote here that.
Yeah, we can go back to that quote maybe once I get my notes.
All right.
But I don't know why I can't seem to. Okay, finally.
And we can't see you.
All right, you can't see me now?
Yeah, you turned off your video.
Oh. All right, how's that? Is the video back on?
Yes.
All right, so you can see that we've rehearsed this very carefully and we've worked out all the technical difficulties way before this presentation. You know, I'm sorry you weren't able to hear all of that song, but even just looking at the lines in the song, you know, lines like the butcher, the baker, the drummer, and then makes no difference what groups I'm in. I am no better and neither are you. We are the same, whatever we do. Different strokes for different folks, even Scooby-Doo. And we've got to live together. Sly's song is an anthem for social equality and cultural diversity. Two Principles author and activist Ibram X. Kendi exhorts his readers to practice in his groundbreaking book, How to Be an Anti-Racist. In prose that is both clear and concise, Kendi cuts to the crux. One either believes problems are rooted in groups of people, as a racist does, or locates the roots of problems in power and policies, as an anti-racist does. He holds these truths to be self-evident. Racism is real, racism is rampant, and racism is rampantly irrational. Why else would bigots use tanning booths to turn their skin browner? Black celebrities use bleach, and Donald Trump used both. Kendi shares a similar and considerably more sobering observation. Black people are apparently responsible for calming the fears of violent cops, in the way women are supposedly responsible for calming the sexual desires of male rapists. Before I read How to Be an Anti-Racist, I thought I already was one. Like many Caucasians, I grew up just like you, Kirsten, so steeped in the system I couldn't see my own bias blind spots. Plus, as a happy hippie, I was prone to the magical thinking that the U.S. must be getting more equal because look how far we've come from slavery and segregation. Schools and workplaces fully integrated, and how can America be ruled by white supremacy when between Obama and Kamala, we had a black pres and have a BIPOC vice president in the White House? After reading Kendi, I've gone from it's all good to realizing it's nowhere near good enough to counter the virulent strains of bigotry that long lurking in the shadows are now brazenly blocking voting rights while waving Confederate flags and shouting inhumane slogans and committing vile hate crimes at an unprecedented rate. How to Be an Anti-Racist is a call to action. It's also an invitation to allyship in a way that reminds me of two earlier influences in progressive activism, Dick Gregory and Gil Scott-Heron. The former was a social protest black comedian, the latter a black self-titled bluesician. Like Kendi, they each share a passionate commitment to dismantling racism. Dick Gregory's stage act was part stand-up comedy and part social protest. His books, like From the Back of the Bus, were just as all-out hilarious, eye-opening, and heart-widening. 50 years later, I still remember and tell some of his witty lines like, "In most places in the country, voting is looked upon as a right and a duty. In Georgia, it's a sport. There's a new dance called the Civil War Twist. The northern part of you stands still, while the southern part tries to secede. Hell hath no fury like a liberal scorned." I wouldn't mind paying taxes if I knew they were going to a fair and a friendly country. I still tell these because they're still topical and, sadly, just as relevant now as they were then. Gregory's fiery indictment of racial injustice played a pivotal role in my choice to do an individualized major in African American culture. His commitment to make world hunger personal by fasting 1 day a week inspired me to do the same every Tuesday throughout my junior and senior year, a discipline I picked up again in 2020 and continued to practice. So if I'm grumpy on a Zoom call Tuesday night, now you know why. Reading Kendi has been like rediscovering the humor and the humanity of Dick Gregory and the satirical derision with linguistic precision of Gil Scott-Heron, who Downbeat magazine described as the most dangerous musician in America. Gil Scott, considered by many the godfather of rap, intertwined poetry with social commentary to speak truth to power. In performance pieces like the H2O GATE Blues, We Beg Your Pardon, America, A B-Movie President, he'll use spoken word rhyme to set racism to rhythm, the way a conductor waves his baton to bring symphonies to life. Long before critical race theory questioned the whitewashing of inequality for oppressed BIPOC communities, Gil Scott penned his own public critique. A scathingly satirical send-up of the conventional accounts of African roots he called Black History, the World. Here's a timely excerpt. Another way we knew that natives were backward, or at least this is how we were taught, is that unlike the very civilized people of Europe, these tribal units actually fought. And yes, there was primitive art, and they were masters of hunting and fishing, and courtesy came from the heart. And yes, there were medicine, tools, religion, and intertribal communication by drum, but no paper or pencils or other utensils, and these folks never even heard of a gun. Still, we are victims of word games. Semantics is always a bitch. Places once referred to as underdeveloped are now called mineral rich. Black unity is always kept just beyond reach. Egypt and Libya used to be in Africa. They've been moved to the Middle East. There are examples galore, but if interpreting were left up to me, I assure you I'd swear every time, this version ain't mine. That's why it's called His Story. My own story of being an anti-racist has had plenty of plot twists. For starters, it didn't help that I was raised in the all-white part of town. From the time I was a toddler, two facts I could confidently summon were my age, in years and number of months, and my street address, 291 Windsor Road, Englewood, New Jersey. Around the age I finally started telling people how old I was just in years, my dad decided I could go sledding at the nearby junior high on my own. Around my third or fourth ride, I spotted several boys who didn't have sleds standing at the top of the hill. I'd never seen them before, and I'd never seen skins so dark. I smiled and asked if they were new to the neighborhood. The tallest nodded and asked, "You live on this block?" "No, I live at 291 Windsor Road." "Hey, this hill is really great. And if you want, you can borrow my sled and have a ride. It's really fun." The tall one took me up on it immediately, and we watched him zip off. When he returned, the second tallest asked if he could have a turn. I nodded happily. After he got back, I turned to the last boy, the closest to my height, and said, "Your turn." As soon as he got back, the tallest grabbed the sled and took off for a second ride. It was starting to get dark, and I wanted another turn or two before I had to go home. But I figured these kids didn't have a sled, so 2 rides each seemed only fair. By the time the third boy got back to the top, I was blowing on my fingers and hands to keep them warm. I walked over to retrieve the sled. The tallest blocked my path. I looked at him and said, "I'd like my sled back so I can have a ride." "What do you mean, your sled? This here's our sled now." "Is not. I lent it so you could have a ride. Now it's time to give it back." The second tallest laughed at me and said, "Finders keepers, losers weepers." I shot back, "You didn't find it. I let you borrow it, and now you need to give it back." The shortest shoved me to the ground. I jumped to my feet and socked him in the nose so hard it drew blood. The second tallest kicked my leg out from under me. I sprawled on my back. The tallest straddled me and pinned my arms to the ground. The shortest said, "Make Whitey cry, uncle." I refused. To make me reconsider, the second tallest force-fed me a fistful of snow. I swallowed a bunch of insults as well. When the tallest tightened his long fingers around my windpipe, I mumbled, "Uncle." He glowered at me, louder. I had to say it 5 times before he finally let me up. The second tallest said, "Go home, white boy, and ask your daddy to get you another sled." Stupidly, I shot back, "I'm going to tell my daddy what you did, and you're going to be in big trouble." The tallest cocked his fist. The shortest stepped between us and said, "Where your daddy be at?" "He's at home." You mean that house where you used to live? That's our home now? 291 Windsor? You want to find your daddy, you best know your new address." My body went into anaphylactic shock. No sled, no home, no hope. I'm not even in first grade and I'm having an existential crisis. Geez, I'm Francis Crowe. A police car pulled up. The black kids scattered. I grabbed my sled and ran to the cop. He kindly offered to give me a lift. "Where to?" "Officer, the only address I know is 291 Windsor Road, but I'm afraid to go there because those boys that beat me up say they live there now." That's so. Hop in. Let's have a look." When we got to what used to be my house, everything about it looked just like I remembered. The cop walked me to the front steps and rang the bell. When the door opened and my dad looked at us, I burst into tears. Flash forward to the 5th grade in Grover Cleveland Elementary School. When our principal told us we were going to be integrated, I didn't know what he meant. But when I learned a busload full of black kids were set to show up at the end of the week, I took direct and decisive action. I protest. 2 friends on the block and I went door to door with a handmade petition, asking neighbors to help us block the chocolates and keep our school vanilla. Sadly, most of them signed. My bigoted stance was strictly based on generalizations, textbook racism. The only 3 black people I ever met had beaten me up and tried to steal my sled and my address. So that meant anyone with chocolate-colored skin would beat white kids up. In racist math, 1 bad means all are bad, makes 2 wrongs, and 2 plus 2-sided logic equals a forsaken conclusion. My formulas were soon tested. The instructor was a fellow 5th grader named Dennis Tinsley, a new black student who had found out I was the fastest kid in school and challenged me to a race. Nobody'd beaten me in 5 years. Undefeated, I was undaunted. Sure, Dennis was several inches taller, but he had ratty sneaks, spoke messed up English, and the kind of nylon my mom wore on her legs, he had stuck to his scalp. Clearly, this dude was clueless. He lined up for a 100-yard dash from the big oak tree to the jungle gym at the other end of the playground. On your mark, get set, go. My feet tore off the starting line and I pumped my legs and arms as fast as I could fly. 20 yards passed with no sound of any other footsteps. I glanced over my right shoulder. Dennis hadn't taken a step. Flashing a grin like Magic Johnson after a dazzling no-look pass, he cried, "Ready or not, here I come." Took off like a pro sprinter. His floppy sneaks pounded the ground, kicking up so much dirt, it was like I was racing the cartoon Roadrunner in real life. I jerked my head around and ran for all I was worth. 25 yards from the jungle gym, I heard footsteps. A minute later, we were dead even. Then he sprinted ahead. I couldn't believe he'd given me such a huge lead and was leaving me in the dust. When I joined him at the finish line, I admiringly stuck out my hand to give him a congratulatory shake. Dennis shot me another magic smile and said, "Give me 5, my man." I hadn't thought there were any stakes to the race, but I pulled out the money my dad had given me for the school lunch and said, "Sorry, all I got is $2. Dennis grinned. "I don't want no money. Just give me some skin." Skin? This is worse than I thought. Flummoxed, I fished in my pocket for my penknife and asked, "How much flesh do you want me to scrape off?" Dennis's grin dissolved into a raucous cackle. When he finally stopped laughing, he looked at me with a wide smile. "Yo, bro, you one funny white boy. You got you some soul." When he saw me look at the bottom of my sneaker, he draped his arm around me like we were best buds and said, "I'm about to make you my new main man." The warmth of his touch helped me loosen up. He gave my shoulder a squeeze and said, "Just so we clear, when I hold up my palm, you slap it with yours. You dig?" I winked and said, "Dig? Sorry, Dennis, I don't have a shovel." Dennis gave the back of my head a little tap and told me, "Damn, that's deep." I was a lot more shallow and square than deep and hip, but being Dennis Tinsley's main man gave me a crash course in giving someone some skin, cupping someone's head and sharing a high five. Hanging tight with Dennis and enjoying things that were rad and bad opened up a whole new world, one which I've never stopped exploring nor ceased being delighted to discover. I'll leave you where I started, with that one-line quote from Dr. Cornel West. Never forget that justice is what love looks like in public. Aho, ashe, and blessed be.
Thank you, Rob. And hang on a second, guys. Somewhere in the middle of all this is my PowerPoint, I promise. With the link that we need. Here's a quote that Rob had. One either believes problems are rooted in groups of people as racist or locates the roots of problems in policies, power and policies as an anti-racist. And now for a little Joni Mitchell.
No, Joan Baez.
Joan Baez, sorry.
No worries.
One of those days.
Yep.
Before you go to bed tonight, eat 1/2 teaspoon of this before 10 p.m. and electrify your metabolism by over.
We are not afraid. We are not afraid. We are not afraid today.
Thank you, Rob. Now is the time in our service for sharing of joys and concerns. If you woke this morning with a joy so great that you just need to shout it from the mountaintops, or trouble so deep that you need the support and loving care of this beloved community, now is the time to share it. Go ahead, Gary.
Many of you know that Christy's dad has been in declining health for some time. And we got a call last Tuesday night, I think, that he was admitted to the hospital, and shortly thereafter got the message that he was being sent to palliative care, also known as hospice. So we scrambled together and packed for an indefinite amount of time. We had no idea how long we'd be up there. And he passed Wednesday night in our presence, peacefully. And fortunately, it was quick. It was quick. And he got to see his family before he went. So we were up there for a while, and we're back home now. Thank you.
What was his name, Gary?
Dan.
Are there other joys and concerns this morning? Go ahead, Sandra.
I just want to respond to that last song because I was in some of those marches, and your service this morning was just very profound and meaningful. And on Being this morning, they talked about the seeds that get planted that don't manifest for years forward. And I just feel the seed that was planted in those songs, and scanning that crowd with the multiracial faces all singing "We Shall Overcome," and then being here with you today, reckoning and telling these frightening and dreadful stories of our own life experiences, but bringing those seeds to those childhood experiences and just feeling the power of change and of consciousness and the forgiveness and the grace of it all, of us being here together, being able to talk about these things openly and vulnerably. I really appreciate the vulnerability that both of you shared this morning. And I'm in the mystery of change, and that song somehow captured for me the whole lifelong journey that the people who were at that event are still on, and I'm still on it. And I got a book out of the library yesterday called The Walls Between Us, and it's a white woman telling her life story. And oh my God, she lived in Princeton, New Jersey in the 50s. I graduated from Princeton High School in 1958. She is telling my story. And it's just blowing my mind how everything's coming together and coming up and getting clear in a way that I'm just feeling grateful, as well as wanting to engage, as your first quote said, in, voting and all the other things that are required of us today. But the journey of owning is just what I'm giving thanks for today, and your leadership for that.
Are there other joys and concerns? Ellen?
Hi. Well, I have been kind of down and sad and feeling alone for like a whole lot of time. And so I need to thank you for those. I mean, the music, Sly and the Family Stone. I was at the Fillmore East when he performed that. And if I tell you that the people were cheering all that he was saying, and it wasn't just, yay, it's a happy song. It's like, that song has stuck with me. So you talk about, how the music just brings so much of that feeling back, and Joan, I used to walk across Sheep's Meadow and hear her singing that song. It would just go out across the whole field. You wouldn't have to be anywhere near where she was. I assume it was a microphone, but still, her voice was so awesome. And it was like the soundtrack of our lives, And I grew up very sheltered in a way in a Jewish community. And I don't even think for most of my childhood, I knew that everybody around me was Jewish, but my classmates were Jewish, the teachers in the public school were Jewish, but we weren't focused on being Jewish. We were focused on being Americans. And we were so dedicated to being Americans. And I was fortunate to go to school in an integrated high school and have Black friends and get to know people personally, and but we led separate lives. And white privilege was my mother telling me, when you apply for a job, you don't say yes when they ask you, do you take Jewish holidays off? So that's more like passing in my mind, but that was the world we lived in. My mother persistently insisted that everybody in the world hates the Jews. Everybody hates the Jews. She said that over and over again. And I just disagreed so much with that I had to go out and marry a white man who wasn't Jewish. And so twice, not just once, two different men. The first guy was, forget it. But, second guy was my really love of my life, but didn't really work. But at least he gave me my son. So there's that. And even, I hear in my son's kind of racism in a way, but it isn't against race. It's about politicians. All politicians are crooked. He says things like, my representatives are supposed to represent me. I'm like, okay. I doubt that he's ever called one of them and told them what he wanted, because he's too busy being angry. So that's a kind of racism too. That's that generalized, look at somebody, one guy's a crook, everybody's a crook. So, we live in a really confusing world. And so I'm really grateful for all of you. And thank you for this service.
Thanks, Ellen. Kim?
You're welcome.
Kim, you have your hand up.
Good morning. I have a joy and a sorrow. And this this doesn't start off sounding like the joy, but it is. I couldn't be with you last Sunday because I was with a friend in the emergency room in Bay State, partly because that's the only way you can get into the hospital now, is through the emergency room. And we were there thinking that she had metastatic pancreatic cancer. And so that was not a good thing, but it turns out not to be that. All thanks to all powers everywhere. And she is out of the hospital now, and it's actually a liver injury that should be very healable, and she may not even need steroids and stuff. So I am just so grateful and thankful that I'm not having to plan for the imminent demise and funeral of my beloved friend of 33 years. It is a very happy week. And of course, my sorrow is for what's happening in the Ukraine. can we just not do this again? It's just unbelievable. And so, yeah, it's on my mind all the time.
Thank you. I'd like to light a candle of joy and reflect it three different ways. The first for my partner in crime, Debka, that she have a great trip to Argentina and tango to her heart's delight. I want to really thank Dick and Jean for being here and for being part of our church community. It helps me to know that I'm not in a kind of cultural Caucasian vacuum. So it's really helpful that you both are active members in our church. And I want to send out a little love to my friend Gary Cannon because at another really pivotal race in my young life, we squared off, and unlike Dennis Tinsley, I kicked his butt. He'll disagree. He'll tell you he won the race. Anyway, it's kind of amazing. That race was at 7 years old. I'm now 67, and 60 years later, here he is, still showing up on the Zoom cream. Glad to have you here, Gary. Deb, you too.
Jean, is that you raising your hand there, Jean? Go right ahead, love.
Yes, it is. Hi. First of all, I just want to thank Kirsten and Rob for your program today. And I know it was difficult to really speak out to racism the way you both did. I know how hard it is for me, Dick, and Gloria to speak to these different groups about what we go through. But, I think it's good to have whites talk about it, because a lot of times when Black or brown people talk about it, it is being perceived as, just ungrateful or complaining, So I just want to thank you both for doing that. And also, I just want to, give our prayers to the people in Ukraine. I mean, it's just awful and just devastating what is going on. And the fact that it is just so unnecessary. This did not have to happen. But, there's a lot of evil in the world. And unfortunately, we are dealing with it on a continuous basis. Okay, so thank you both again. And I wish you both the best. Thank you.
Are there other joys and concerns? Russ?
Yes. Concern. A lot of my thoughts and feelings echo what I've been hearing about the topic today, about Ukraine. And I don't know if I'm being selfish or what, but I live alone, and when I shut off the computer after this, everything that we've been talked about, I'll just be with it by myself. And I feel so much hurt right now for all of this, and guilt for being as comfortable as I am here, even though I have financial vulnerability, but it's hard. It's hard. But I'd like to just add one more thing, a little incidental joy. Took me by surprise. I was by chance looking at this old photograph of the center of Greenfield in the winter of 1888, and people out there shoveling this. It was a huge blizzard. And when I'd seen this photograph before, I'd always, for some reason, thought, okay, I'm looking west on Main Street. And then I just realized that I was actually looking east, because I could see in the background of the photograph the steeple of our original church. And it made me happy. I'm not exactly sure why, but it did. And so thank you. I don't feel quite as alone with this right now. It's a big world, and I'm peace in it. Thank you.
Thank you, Russ. Pam?
I wondered, what I might say or contribute, and I'm not quite sure, but I appreciate the fact that you all did the presentations today. You did a great job. You thought about it a long time. It's really great and appreciated. And I thought to myself, you know what? One thing that hasn't been mentioned yet, but it should be, is that the Unitarian Universalist Association has been working on this with the Journey Toward Wholeness since the 1980s. And they spent, 25 years. For 25 years, trying to do outreach to Unitarian Universalist, almost all white, higher income churches since the 1980s. And then it dissolved. It was sort of like electing Obama. It dissolved into, we elected an African-American president. And immediately it sort of dissolved, and the people who were leading the Journey Toward Wholeness didn't have jobs anymore. Some of them African-American, some of them white. And it's now paying off. So sometimes it takes years and years and years to siphon in, So, I could go through my own experience, but I'm not going to do that now. That's kind of inappropriate. But I just wanted to bring up the fact that this association is doing its homework. Now it's working more, I would say, with Indigenous people and with also the growing out of the Martin Luther King's work with African Americans, many groups of people, truly out of love, truly out of love. I was absolutely burned up by the recorder yesterday, just really upset by John, I don't know how to say his last name, or his writing. But I can say that we've been working on trying to do the homework for a long time, and it takes years. And I'm just grateful that y'all are hanging in there. We're still at it. Appreciate all the homework you've been doing. Thank you.
Okay, my friends. That was the very interesting joys and concerns. And I ask you to take a couple of deep breaths. I'm going to offer just a small little prayer. May all that have experienced the deep sorrow of loneliness, of grief, of losing a loved one, of illness, of remorse. May you all find deep peace and know that the compassion of this community is around you, within you, and with you on your journey. May those of you who find great joy and nostalgia in music, in milestones, in remembering your own experiences, and in the hope of a future where we work towards being anti-racist and allies of all people. May you know that the love and compassion and joy of this community is with you, within you, and around you, and supporting you. May all of our aspirations be held with loving care, and may it be so.
Aho.
I told Rob we were going to go long. I had no idea we'd already be at a half hour. So Rob, my suggestion is that you give the benediction and we skip the postlude.
Sure. Or we could do this. We could let people who would like to hear the postlude stick around, and people who want to go can go.
Well, I was going to invite them into having further conversation. There are a lot of stories that bubbled here, and there are people who want to feel.
Well, this is good that everybody's going to see this. For once, I actually think Kirsten has better thinking than me. So I will gladly defer to Kirsten.
All right, you just go ahead and read your benediction, and then we're not even going to go back to a shared screen.
Okay. Denial. I should mention that this is a benediction that I drew from a couple sections of Ibram X. Kendi's good troubling book, How to Be an Anti-Racist. Denial is the heartbeat of racism, beating across ideology, color, cultures, and whole nations. One either allows racial inequities to persevere, as a racist does, or confronts racial inequities, as an anti-racist does. There is no in-between safe space of not racist. The only way to undo racism is to consistently identify and describe it, and then dismantle it, as an anti-racist does. Thank everyone again for joining us today, and for being in a place where conversations like these that are not easy, but that are essential.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Rob. Dan, are you saying peace and out, or are you, okay, well, have yourself, thank you for being with us, Dan, and have a great rest of your day. For those of you who would like to, I invite you to stay and continue the conversation. I can give you another 20 or 30 minutes of my day. You're well worth it.
And Kirsten, can I just quickly intervene? Dan Tynan, I'm guessing, but I hope I'm correct, that this is going to be recorded on YouTube?
It's on YouTube right now. Before we do the discussion, though, I'd like to say goodbye to the folks on YouTube. So
I
we
think
have
that's a
this
great
as
idea,
an hour and a half on the
Yep.
it's available at Franklin County UUs, the channel. Just go to YouTube and look for the channel Franklin County UUs.
Great. Thank you for always doing that for us, Dan.